Welcome to Happy Hour with Heather and Guest. I'm joined by members of the band Aawks. At least I'm almost 100% sure it's pronounced that way.
You got it.
Okay, awesome. Which will well, first let me continue with the intro. But from Barrie, Ontario, the debut album is called Heavy on the Cosmic. It came out in June. I've had the privilege of listening to it. Now, my first question is, where did the name of the band come from?
The name of the band, well, it's like you probably heard of like an Ox Squad, like
I
the
have not.
Weirdos. Okay, so like when I don't know, I grew up near like London, Ontario, Canada, and way back at some point, I'm not going to say how long ago, and an Auk was kind of like an oaf or like a dweeb or like a nerd or one of those kind of dork names, right?
Gotcha.
So I always I kind of identified with those people. So yeah, we're like a group of awkward people.
Okay,
And
no, that
and then Bob always says that it's because it sounds like, I'm not going to speak for him. He can speak for himself. Well, I shut off a bunch of fans that are in here. One second.
What is it, Bob?
Ceiling fans or like group fans?
You know where we are. Cooling fans.
I always took it to be like ox, like a OX, like a big fuzzy animal, a big stinky lumbering,
Heavy
with tusks.
it seems to work on a lot of levels.
But cuddly at the same time.
That reminds me, when I went to university in New Orleans, Louisiana, and cool. There was a band. My freshman year, they started. The name was OIL, which they would always say that it's pronounced Earl, because that's how the New Orleans locals would pronounce it.
Yeah, it's funny. I thought the same thing about ox, only it's like an English guy saying orc. Like,
yeah, I mean, what's real. I mean, I almost didn't want to ask because then the magic would be gone. But I'm glad that there's so many different answers. But that's
coming up.
That's cool though that it seems to be more of like a local Ontario slang, which just adds to the mystique of it. So that's great. But it is also fitting. It is, since the music is very much, heavy and plodding. I think the ox, the animal, works as a great symbol of the music. So,
absolutely.
So many levels. And I have to. Is there a huge? I'm not so familiar with Ontario. Is there a pretty thriving metal scene there?
I think so. Yeah, we participated in our first metal fest on the weekend, actually, with a bunch of kind of local bands, and there was like seven bands there. But yeah, there's like, I mean, Toronto's a pretty big metropolitan, like several million people with a pretty thriving metal scene.
Right. You'll have to forgive my ignorance about the geography of Ontario, but
it's a vast place.
Yes. Well, I did happen to see. So if you're watching this and you're not familiar with the type of music Ox play, you should definitely change that. Pick up the album that recently came out in June, Heavy on the Cosmic, which I believe is your debut feature-length album.
Absolutely true.
There's an EP that's also available, which I haven't had a chance to listen to, but I plan on doing a deep dive. I got really excited listening to the music because it's pretty much right in my wheelhouse of checking all the boxes of stuff I enjoy. So it's sort of like, if you're not as interested, it's kind of like psychedelic stoner with a really great tone. Think Fu Manchu in terms of the tone. That's what I initially thought of. But I did see that you played with Earthless.
We did.
Who
yes.
Was one of my favorite bands of the last couple of years. So if you're into any of that music, you're going to love what Aawks has to offer. So please check them out. It's really I always love finding contemporary bands who can sort of take the mantle from a lot of the bands that I really love that aren't making music anymore. So it's always great. Plus, there's certain the combination of things you bring, the psychedelic, the sort of stoner, but a little bit of progressive. Not it's sort of like it would be hard to pinpoint it exactly, but it sort of falls into that umbrella. And now I feel like I'm doing way too much talking. So
no, I like a lot of prog stuff. I mean, I grew up on Crimson and Yes and Gong and all those 70s bands, and I mean, we all listen to all sorts of different stuff, so it all kind of seeps in its own way, right? Like you'll find all sorts of weird little hints of things here and there. I hope. I always joke that like I don't really try to write any one specific type of music, but I think I'm not a good enough musician where if I try to write something specific, it's going to sound like that. Like if I try to write a Rush song, it's not going to sound like Rush. It's going to sound like some guy trying to make a Rush song that, it spurts out like something else.
Yeah, I remember hearing once that when Kurt Cobain wrote Smells Like Teen Spirit, he was essentially trying to write a Pixies song. That's his.
Right.
So
on our EP, there's a song that I tried to write like a Pixies song, actually, called Summer Haze. Kind of came out like more like a Breeder song than a Pixie song, to be honest. So I'm a big fan of both of those bands, but yeah, that's me trying to write a Breeder song.
Well, I look forward to checking out the EP. Definitely pick up Heavy on the Cosmic. I had the song Space City on repeat. That turned out to be, not that I could pick a favorite song, but that was one that I really was getting into. So definitely don't sleep on Heavy on the Cosmic. I just want to reiterate that one more time. And if you were to pick a couple of bands, if people aren't familiar with the music and you were to say, if you like these bands, that we're the music for you.
Yeah.
Did I
You froze just for a sec there. So the last thing we heard was if you could pick a couple of bands people don't know.
Well, if you were going to compare, like the music that you've written is for fans who like the following bands.
Yep.
Like, is there like a 5 bands that you would put out just so people have an idea?
Bob. I know what Kris is going to say, but I'll throw out a couple. We're kind of sludgy, but kind of poppy too, with hooks and shorter song structures. I'd say kind of like Harvey Milk, where it's heavy, but it's got some hooks to it as well, but a little bit of weird stuff. And then the other one I would say would probably be like Jeff the Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Poppiness. And I'm sure Kris has a couple off the top of his head too.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, well, Sabbath is number one always, right? Sabbath is the nexus point for all the stuff I write, for sure. The first like 6 Sabbath albums, anything with Ozzy in it. And then I'm a huge fan of Windhand. And I'm a early Floyd, not too like anything before Dark Side of the Moon. I'm a giant fan of. So I try to like let a bit of the psychedelic stuff seep in. Psychedelic, heavy, fuzzy. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I could go on and on and on. There's like, I'm really into all sorts of weird bands, but those ones are big ones for us.
Well, it's really interesting to sort of hear where what the influences were, and then now go back to be able to try to pick out like, okay, I can see where this is reminiscent, or something along those lines. Not that anything sounded like anything else, but you can definitely hear like, oh, this is probably what they had on in the background during the songwriting process. Which I, as someone who's not a musician, I'm always really interested in where the creativity comes from.
Yeah, I
So
think like anytime like I'm writing riffs or things, I try not like I'm not trying not. I don't rip off verbatim, but if I'm really into something and I'm super like like enthused by it, it's going to seep into the music. So I went through a huge Monolord phase there for the last couple of years, and like I just love their riffs and how heavy but they're simple and powerful. So I try to take the basic elements of what they do and then employ it. And if we're making like riff heavy music with fuzz pedals, it's going to have some similarities, right?
sure, sure. I think, yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, the music is certainly unique to you. Like I wouldn't say that it sounded like anyone else, but you could definitely see that there was influence from, a lot of these other bands there. Like that's where the germ of the idea came from. Which is
Yeah, like
which is really cool.
if I'm really into like a certain riff, I'll try to figure out, well, what is it about that riff that I dig musically? And I mean, I'm not a classically trained musician by any means, but I know enough that I can say, okay, well, this is what it is. It's like that. I like that syncopated part, the how it hits on the offbeat or something, or like how it cycles through twice, but the second time it's got something a bit different. So I'll take the element of like the concept of the riff and then employ it into my own little bit.
Yeah, well, whatever you're doing, keep doing it because it
I
works
can't
really
not,
well.
man. I mean, you can ask Randy. That's like I'm obsessed with it, or we're obsessed with it. I would do it every day if we could. If we didn't have
Yeah,
day
yeah.
jobs and
Well,
kids.
I mean, obviously, this album came out in June. I'm looking forward to more work, more music in the future. So, what are the plans right now? Is there a touring in line? Are you going to be playing gigs? Are you working on a new album? What's
All of the
next?
above. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. So yeah, I'll let Randy speak. So, you may speak, woman.
thank you. No, you nailed it. So definitely in the early of 2023, we've got some like mini tour type stuff starting to assemble, and we're also in the midst of working on a split.
Tour with.
Oh, you want me to tell who the
Yeah,
tour is?
sure.
Oh,
Might as well.
sorry. So the tour is with a Quebec-based band called Sons of Arrakis. And so we're going to be doing like kind of a mini tour here in Ontario with them and then switching over in March to Quebec and do a mini tour over there. So we kind of get to play each other's house a little bit, and have some fun with that. And then, yeah, we're working on a split. So there's a new song in the works for that. It's a 7-inch split, if I'm saying it correctly.
Yep.
And then, yes, there's always new music happening in this very room right here, and it never stops. And it only stopped to do this interview right now.
Gotcha. Well, I feel privileged that I was able to get you away. I feel sort of bad that I took you away from it, but
It never ends.
yeah, yeah. Well, you go back to the well and
Oh, yeah.
draw upon the other.
Oh,
Right, so the other person that does the show, huge fan of the type, this type of music. As soon as I started listening to the music, I immediately said to her, you're not going to be talking to the band, but you definitely have to check out this album. So it's always really cool when like I can take new music to her right off the bat before this even goes out or is recorded or anything, and so it's kind of like insider trading
Yeah.
in a way.
We appreciate that, man. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's again when I discover a band that can kind of take the place on the mantle, then you don't really find bands like that check all the boxes often. So when you do, you make sure to bookmark it. So I'm really glad that you're putting in because the band, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you only wrote this album in 2020 or
Pretty much, yeah. Like
started.
there was a few like little bits and pieces from some stuff before in 2019, but it was mostly 2020, 2021.
Gotcha. So I mean, it's essentially this is since the pandemic. That's
yes.
when. So new emergence of music. So
Yes.
I'm excited to be here at the ground floor. But yeah, it's a great album. Check it out. Heavy on the Cosmic. It came out in June. You can get it on Bandcamp and wherever it's streaming. And I believe you have a pretty wide social media presence. I know views, and I know you're on pretty much every platform. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Look out for Aawks, AAWKS. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but really at the end of the day, it just means good music. So definitely check it out. And thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I hope you have a good rest of the evening practice or whatever you decide to end up doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You as well.
Yeah. Take
Have
care.
a great evening. Take care.
Have a good one.